In the hush of 1789, nestled in a quiet bend of the Hudson River Valley, a widow passed away alone in a house no one liked to enter. When officials came to inventory her modest belongings, they found no diary, no letters, no prayer book, just a single grey leather ledger hidden deep in the soot-blackened chimney flue. It wasn't a record of days or devotions. It was a record of people, some of whom quite simply vanished. If you're watching this right now, tell us where in the world you are and what time it is. There's something hauntingly beautiful about strangers across time zones, unraveling the same forgotten story together. In the spring of 1791, 2 years after her quiet death, the modest cottage of Mrs. Anna Harraby, overlooking the northern curve of the Hudson, was submitted to probate inventory. There wasn't much to count. 11 acres of untamed land, a 2-room clapboard cottage with a crooked loft, a small garden where the chundula and turnips had outgrown their order, tangled like memory, left unattended. Her husband, a former schoolmaster from Kingston, had died nearly 15 years earlier. There were no surviving children, no named heirs. So the property passed to the county. On a still April morning, a young probate clerk named Elijah Stillman arrived to assess the Harraby estate. Just 19, apprenticed by letter to the Dutchess County Register, Stillman had never worked a solitary inventory before. His writing from that day survives, still preserved in the county archives. His list is plain, even poetic in its sparseness. 1 tin basin, 2 pewter spoons, 3 jars of spoiled peach preserves, 1 pair of leather slippers well worn. Total value, £4 10 shillings. But what caught his attention wasn't what lay in the open. It was what had been hidden behind the parlor hearth. The fireplace showed no sign of recent use. No ash. The bricks dry. The grate swept clean. An iron set rusted cold with disuse. But Stillman noticed a thin seam near the rear of the firebox. 1 brick oddly discolored, ever so slightly warped. When he tapped it, it rang hollow. Behind it, a recess, just big enough to fit a child's satchel and black with soot. Inside one object, a small grey calfskin ledger, its spine unmarked, its cover flecked with ash, though nowhere else in the flue was ash to be found. Stillman noted it in the margins of his report. Small ledger, fire-sealed, condition poor but intact. He later said he didn't open it, whether out of respect or unease. He never clarified which. What we do know is this: that small book remained in his personal possession for at least 2 weeks. He logged its measurements, its cover type, its binding. That entry survives. The book itself did not pass into county records, not until 1819, nearly 30 years later, when it was discovered in a locked drawer in Stillman's desk. He had died suddenly of consumption and melancholic fatigue, as the record states. When the ledger was finally opened, its purpose became chillingly clear. It was not a journal. There were no dates, no flourishes, no narrative. Each page was a precise list, a name, an item brought, the exact duration of a visit, and one final column: temper on departure. Some notes were mundane, tired, cordial. Others were not gripping, agitated left coat behind. Some names appeared again and again until they were scratched out entirely. One name, Miss H, appeared 5 times. each entry closer together. The last did not finish tea. Among the final pages, someone had written a line, then blotted it carefully. But the pressure of the pen had left a mark. Raking the paper in angled light revealed a single sentence, as she knew they changed when they crossed the sill. The fireplace had not been lit in decades, but the soot-sealed ledger whispered that something had burned long before any flame was visible. From what little survives, Anna Harraby seemed an unremarkable woman, English-born, widowed young. Moved to the Hudson in 1769 with her husband Nathaniel, a quiet surveyor from Albany. When he died of yellow fever in 1776, Anna filed for widow's relief, 4 shillings. 1 length of flannel cloth. Then, silence. The records thin. But oral memory lingers. Neighbors recalled her as dependable, quiet. She attended no church, but sent dried chundula to every funeral in the district. She rarely spoke, but she remembered every child's name who helped her carry parcels at the spring fair. Her cottage had only one door. No one ever saw a guest arrive or leave. And yet, the village would say softly, as if not wanting to be heard, she was never alone. So tell me, traveler, what do you make of this widow by the river and that ledger sealed in soot? The next chapter unfolds shortly. The grey book found sealed behind Anna Harraby's hearth made no mention of years. No reference to Nathaniel, her late husband. No dates, no titles, no reflections. It was a ledger, but not of any kind you'd find in a merchant's drawer. There were no debts, no soap or barley to tally, no calculations, no balance sheets. What it recorded was people. Each page began the same, a name centered at the top. Beneath it, 4 narrow columns ruled by a dry and uneven quill arrival. Provision, duration, disposition. Some entries stretched full width, careful and complete. Others broke off mid-line, the ink dragged like a pen, pulled away by hesitation or by something unseen. Take this one. Mr. Ephraim Mott. Arrival. Damp sleeves, breath short. Thumb bruised. Provision, 1 pot barley broth not taken. Duration, 2 hours, 17 minutes. Disposition blinked often. Did not rise when coat returned. Walked home east of ditch. No greetings, no preamble. No explanation of who invited whom. Just observation. Precise. Clinical. Almost cold. Tell me what kind of book notices how often you blink or where you turn to leave. In nearly a third of the entries, visitors brought things. Preserves, letters, a stitched cloth, a book, even a parcel of eggs, always listed in detail. But the one who received them, Anna Harraby, was never mentioned. One haunting entry notes, child, Susanna B. Painted coin purse unopened. 3 months later, Susanna appears again, only did not speak. Watched the kettle. Wiped mouth with left sleeve. There was no warmth in the tone, no sentimentality, no reflection. The voice was distant, an observer more than a participant, as though she stood just outside the scene, watching through a pane of memory or glass. Twice Anna described her visitors as off balance, slightly wrong. No elaboration. One woman identified only as Martha Co. was noted. changed posture 3 times too quickly, apologized without prompting, eyes darker than last year. The last line drew special attention when the ledger was briefly examined during a county archive restoration in 1841. You see, Martha Coe had officially drowned in the river in 1788. Her body had been found 2 miles downstream. The cause accidental. But the ledger suggests she was seen the year after. The question is not whether Anna saw a ghost. The question is whether the dates were wrong, or if the records we trusted were never quite right to begin with. Throughout the book, there is no I, no sense of Anna's voice, no mention of her hands or her feelings. The ledger is not written in first person, but in something stranger, a cool third person, almost like an experimenter taking notes from behind the glass. And then, on the final filled page, the name appears again, Miss H. But something had changed. The handwriting, normally measured and sure-tilted violently. The ink faded almost dry. The quill barely made contact. No columns were filled. Just a single line faintly left. Justified. Stayed too long. Did not knock. The next page was blank. The page after that, carefully torn out. What remains is unsettling. The structure of the grey book had suggested discipline. Each page ruled with exact spacing. Ink strokes weighted evenly. The appearance of order. But then, archivists noticed something. Along the inner gutter of each page where the spine bends and shadows live, there were faint additions, notations in lighter, thinner ink. The color had faded, suggesting a different formula, probably gall-based but more fragile, less oxidized, written much later. These weren't corrections. They weren't commentary. They were something else. Short codes. Odd glyphs, looping marks and combinations like 217F, FP2, 3N. None of it aligned with the main columns. None of it followed the book's visible logic, and the hand that wrote them, similar but less confident. It trembled. It rose oddly uphill in places, as if whoever added these lines was straining against something, or wasn't supposed to be writing at all. It was no second record, not a companion diary. What emerged was a shadow system, a code of behavior, a cipher not meant for the eyes of others, maybe not even for herself. Chapter 3. Temper, unmeasured symbols, unnamed. The margin spoke louder than the ink. They weren't part of the official record, these tiny marks scribbled beside the names. But once you noticed them, you couldn't unsee them. A triangle. A looped figure 8. A candle. With no flame. These symbols reappeared again and again, beside familiar names, particularly the ones linked to strange clipped phrases like did not sit, asked again for the same. One combination repeated 5 times, always beside visits that lasted less than half an hour. And the visitors, a minister's wife, a traveling tinker, a child from the south pasture. Different ages, different lives, but one detail tied them together. Temper unmeasured. In Stillman's 1791 copybook, the only known transcription of these margin marks survives. His notations are careful, uncertain, like someone trying to translate a half-remembered language. bread brought, any, no writing given, voice change recorded, same visitor, different name. Unlit candle. Departed without farewell. But it wasn't the symbols beside names that disturbed him most. It was the entries without names at all. 6 separate times Anna recorded full visits where the name field was left blank, replaced only by a mark. 1 reads, stayed while ill. Took nothing. Touched back wall when leaving. The margin beside it simply says 6p, 0n. Now in rural ledgers of the 18th century, omitting names wasn't rare. Travelers, vagrants, the illiterate, they were often recorded by description or trade. But this didn't feel like oversight. This felt deliberate. These weren't strangers. These were known too well to name. And then there was the symbol. Just once, midway through the book, a circle split vertically. 2 small dots, one on each side. It appears beside the final entry of a man, listed only as Mr. C, a man found in no census. No deed, no baptismal record. His entry is chillingly brief. Arrived unshaven. Smelled of chalk. Did not speak of work. Asked twice about the cellar. No disposition listed. But the margin beside the symbol is the only place in the entire book where Anna breaks her voice into the first person. He did not expect me to have written it down. What did she write that wasn't meant to be written? And who or what was he expecting instead? In the final third of the ledger, something shifts. The margin codes increase. The writing frays. Some notations spill over the ruled lines. Others are scratched at odd angles, intruding into the main columns. 1 page linked to a woman known only as Mrs. P has no entry at all. Just a single line scrawled down the spine. Again, but smaller. And then, silence. The codes vanish. The margins go blank until the very last page. On the inside of the back cover, tucked just above the thread that knotted the binding, someone had written in soft, smudged graphite. I followed the rules. But they left different than they arrived. And for the first time, it became clear the rules were never for her. They were for whatever she was watching change. In the early pages of the Grey Book, everything had its rhythm. Names came with the slow passing of seasons. Visits spaced months apart. Quiet exchanges eggs, hand-sewn linens, polite stays. A midwife noted twice in the winter of 1781. A child from across the bluff delivering preserved pears. It was the ordinary cold of rural life. But then the rhythm broke. The gaps between visits collapsed. Where once there were months, now only days. Then hours. Names began returning subtly altered. A missing suffix. A changed spelling. A title abandoned. Like something trying to repeat itself but slipping. Take Mr. Thomas Reed Jr. On page 34 brought apples soft. Stayed 1 hour 10. 11 pages later, Thomas Reed. No item. Declined chair. Left after question. Just 5 lines below TR. Face pale. Coat too large. Did not speak. No duration. No offering. Only 1 mark in the margin. Odd mirror, not door. Let that sit with you for a moment. Not a door. A mirror. Archivists in the 1830s counted 127 names in the book. 19 of them returned. 7 appeared more than twice, but it was how they returned that mattered. The first visit, however brief, was always respectful. Bread, rhubarb. Church envelopes. The second, something stranger. A carved figure, a broken clasp, a child's embroidery left unfinished. The third almost always brought nothing. And then, nothing at all. No return, no record, no goodbye. The name Ruth Ellery stands apart. She appears 5 times over just 3 weeks. First, rhubarb wrapped in muslin. Second, chalk figure carved roughly, given with apology. And the third, well, we'll get to that. But let me ask you this. If the same person returns with less of themselves each time, are they still the same? We're not done yet. But take a breath. Stretch your fingers. Sip your tea. Because the 4th visit of Ruth Ellery may not be what you expect. The 3rd woman came without warning. No carriage. No sound on the path. She did not look up. She left her hands bare, ungloved, even as frost clung to the corners of the sill. No words, just presence. By the 4th visit, Anna noted something strange. Knelt remained until the kettle whistled. No words exchanged. And then, on the 5th, no details. Just a name underlined twice, followed by a single dash. That dash would reappear 3 more times in the ledger, each beside a familiar name, each without a time of departure, each as if never having left. But when the Harobi County Register from 1790 was consulted, no woman by the name Ruth Ellery could be found. Not in Harobi, not in neighboring parishes. Church records list a Ruth Ellen, born 1752, died 1786 of winter fever. And yet, the grey book, the ledger, records visits from someone of that name well into 1789. So then, who was she? Another presence appeared in the ledger more than once. A man, but only ever referred to as Mr. H. His first visit brought silver button. Seemed unsure if he'd given it before. Second visit. Stared at bread for 11 minutes. Ate none. Requested exact same seat. And the third, more cryptic, asked for the name I used the first time. Said it didn't feel right. Stillman, reviewing this section in 1791, made a side note in the inventory ledger. Some entries written as if prior knowledge predated first recorded visit. Possible error. Or else, the widow was cataloguing return behaviors, not chronology. That phrase, not chronology, was underlined in blue chalk. Now remember that. Because on the inside, back cover of the ledger, hidden behind a pasted linen binding, was a faint list of names written in pencil. None of these names appeared in the official pages. Some were known surnames but offset by generation. Others entirely unfamiliar. At the top of this hidden list, written in darker strokes than the rest. They came to see if it had stopped, but it remembered them differently each time. The handwriting wasn't Anna's. It wasn't matched to any known scribe. Then came the one who unsettled the most Miss H. Her name appears first in autumn of 1787. A blank page separates her entry from the others, unusual in the tightly packed ledger. Her visit was brief. Miss H brought spool of thread. Did not open mouth, eyes slightly misaligned. Stayed 41 minutes. Departed toward orchard. No path taken. The handwriting here slows. The spaces between the words stretch unnaturally, as if Anna's own rhythm had been interrupted. And in the margin, in faint graphite, noticed by both. But both who there is no second observer recorded. 12 pages later, Miss H returns. Same shoes. Nowhere visible. Did not recall previous visit. Offered bone button. Refused tea. Stayed 29 minutes. Asked which direction the door faced. Did not comment when answered. Still no surname, no town affiliation, no family trade or church connection. Just Miss H. And unlike nearly every other visitor, Miss H had no ties to anyone in Harrowby district. Stillman ran the name across census rolls, church registers, tax rosters, funeral ledgers. Nothing. No match. But Anna had recorded her 5 times. The third visit breaks from the usual form. Stood in the doorway for full minute before entering. Removed gloves. Fingernails traced half edge. Brought nothing. Accepted nothing. Spoke one word, warmer. Stayed 17 minutes. There is a symbol in the margin next to this entry one that appears only once elsewhere. Next to a child who never spoke, whose hands were wiped too often, and on the 4th visit sat directly on the floor uninvited. Laid out scraps in a line, red, white, red, white, red. No explanation. No response to greeting. Stayed 12 minutes. Beneath that, Anna added something unusual. Did not age. Same hollows in cheek. And below that, a line had been started. Then scratched out so violently it tore the parchment. The 5th and final entry for Miss H abandoned the book's format completely. No columns, no timestamps. Just her name and 3 quiet lines. She knew where the thread was kept. Did not knock this time. Eyes focused on what was behind me, and then nothing. The ledger ends. So here we are, friend. A ledger from the late 18th century, written by a woman. No historian can quite explain. Recording guests no census ever counted, and visits that never made noise but left. Something behind. Who was Miss H and why did she return again and again? More importantly, what was she watching over Anna's shoulder? We'll let you sit with that for a while. If you're still with us, thank you for keeping the candle lit. We'll be back soon with another tale from the edge of history where silence leaves the deepest mark. Until then, rest easy. This is Sleepy History Tales. The following pages in Anna Harvey's ledger are blank, silent. When the volume was catalogued for archival preservation in 1822, a brief but troubling note was penciled onto the inner slipcover. Last named visitor not found in parish registry or household accounts. Paper ends thereafter. The book itself remained in otherwise remarkable condition. But during a 1903 restoration of the linen binding, a conservator discovered something curious wedged deep inside the inner spine. Reinforcing the book's back cover was a folded scrap of paper, likely used to stiffen the binding. But this was no scrap. When carefully extracted, it was revealed to be a torn slip of writing paper, faint graphite across its center in the same narrow, deliberate hand seen in earlier margin codes. It read only, "I gave her no name, but she wrote it down anyway." The back of the slip bore no writing, just a simple loop drawn in ink, a perfect closed circle, bisected down the middle, like a seal or a cut. Now, listen closely because this next part may be the key to it all. In the spring of 1788, buried roughly 3/4 of the way through Anna Harvey's grey book, there's a single entry that ruptures the pattern. It breaks from her usual cadence of naming adults visitors who brought loaves, shared errands, or traded stories. This entry is different. It names only a child, unnamed boy, small, approx. 6 years, brought by hand. Not by name. No item offered. Did not speak. Did not explore. Stayed 44 minutes, withheld speech. That's it. Clinical, unemotional, observational. Before and after this moment in the ledger, we find nothing unusual, just the herbalist from Tivoli and a tinsmith's niece. But this entry? It's bracketed. 2 vertical lines in red ink flanking either margin like parentheses. They don't match the ledger's ruling. They appear as though something had to be contained or warned against. And the red ink, that alone is a red flag. In Anna's time, red ink was rarely used except in estate accounting debt correction or the marking of punishment in schoolroom ledgers. Nowhere else in Anna's book does it appear. And when archivists in 1874 tested the ink, they found it chemically distinct from Anna's usual black older iron gull-based, almost certainly added at a different time. But was it Anna who added the red marks later, or someone else long after? We'll never know for certain. The child himself is barely described. But what Anna does say reveals more than it seems. He was brought by hand, not introduced, no name given, no adult recorded. He withheld speech, could not speak. There's a subtle difference there, one that linguists of the time would have recognized. It implies refusal, not incapacity. Willful silence. In fact, this same phrasing appears in 18th century school correction logs and charity infirmary records used for children who, for reasons unknown, chose stillness, who resisted sound. Anna makes no mention of fear, no mischief, no signs of curiosity. Only he did not explore. This detail is stark. In her rare entries about children, Anna typically notes small behavior-wandering glances, restless hands, fiddling with cookware. But not here. This child was inert. Archivists later cross-referenced every record from that spring. Dutchess County Parish Census of 1788. No missing children. No unplaced orphans. No school withdrawals. No deaths. No indenture transfers. The books are intact. No boy matching the entry appears anywhere. Stillman's 1791 field copy, the first full transcription of Anna's ledger, contains a margin note beside this entry. Are red marks unexplained, ink not original. He also includes a tiny box drawn around a single letter V. Stillman used this mark only 3 times in his surviving inventories. No one has yet discovered what it meant. But there's more. One final unnerving detail resurfaces again. That same phrase, did not explore. Among Anna's probate papers is a small, hand-drawn floor plan of her home, the Harrowby Cottage, likely drafted to confirm hearth tax exemption. But in the back room, one spot is circled faintly in pencil, a loose floorboard, marked unpinned, a board that moves, that leafed, that perhaps hides. La pièce réapparaît cette fois dans un registre d'entretien du comté, datant de 1793, lorsqu'on envisagea de transformer la maison en hospice. Une note vague indique « Le rez-de-chaussée est inégal. La cave semble vide. Aucune entrée n'a été trouvée. » La transformation n'eut jamais lieu. Et puis nous revenons au carnet d'Anna Harrowby. Entre 2 lignes serrées, à l'encre rouge, elle écrit Il attendait que je lui pose la question. Mais je ne l'ai pas fait. Aucune explication. Aucune mention de l'enfant. Aucune conclusion. Sur la 4e de couverture du carnet, juste sous la couture serrée du tissu, on trouve une empreinte digitale, plus petite que celle d'un adulte, l'encre estompée, mais pas tachée. Nous ne pouvons pas savoir avec certitude qui l'a laissée. Mais la marque est là, comme un murmure que personne n'ose nommer. Cette entrée, bien que brève, est l'une des plus soignées de la seconde moitié du carnet d'Anna. Il n'y a pas de date, seulement un emplacement relatif entre 2 autres notes, l'une de l'administrateur de la paroisse, livrant du lin, et l'autre de la sage-femme, livrant un paquet de cendres de savon. Mais soudain, au milieu de cette écriture froide et régulière, un nom se grave sur la page. Monsieur Elijah Carnat d'Albany a apporté 2 pots de confiture d'abricots. Les fruits semblaient frais, santé, incertains. Il est resté 1 heure et 4 minutes. Il s'est léché les doigts après avoir posé les pots. Ça paraît normal, non? Mais Anna, qui commentait rarement, a employé le mot « saint incertain ». Elle n'a pas dit mauvais ni bon. Elle a laissé une zone grise, un doute tacite. Et puis on retrouve Elijah Carnat dans les archives de l'époque marchand ambulant et agent occasionnel de Wits General à Albany. Il transportait des confitures du sucre de la corde et des os à peigne. Souvent, dans des endroits reculés où les marchands établis ne se rendaient jamais. Un reçu d'expédition d'avril 1789 mentionne 8 boisseaux de pommes, 6 bocaux d'abricots, de la mélasse, de la ficelle, des peignes et des os. Son itinéraire le mena d'Albany jusqu'à Livingston, puis vers Claremont, puis sur les terres de Harrowby, et enfin vers le nord. Il était connu pour sa ponctualité, ses voyages solitaires et sa personnalité atypique, large d'épaules et cheveux, presque entièrement blancs malgré son jeune âge. Sa dernière livraison fut enregistrée comme terminée sans descendance. Mais 6 jours seulement après avoir quitté la maison d'Anna Harrowby, un avis de décès fut publié à Albany. Fièvre soudaine s'est évanouie au marché sans proche. Elijah Carn, 32 ans. Inhumé à Porpafield sur ordre du magistrat. Pas de variole. Source d'infection inconnue. La fièvre a duré moins de 18 heures. Pas d'autopsie. Pas de nécrologie. Aucun souvenir dans le livre de 8, bien qu'il y ait travaillé 5 ans. Elijah disparut des archives comme s'il avait été effacé. Et dans le livre d'Anna, à côté de son nom, figurait une petite annotation, un demi-cercle, non pas à l'encre, mais légèrement griffonné sur le papier avec une épingle ou un feutre, juste en dessous au crayon. Voix sèche m'a demandé s'il y avait une cave. Ce fut la seule fois qu'Anna mentionna l'architecture de sa maison. Le plan du bureau foncier ne comportait pas de cave. La maison était construite sur des pierres brutes avec des fondations superficielles et une simple pièce de rangement à l'arrière. Pas de cave, du moins sur le papier. Et pourtant, en 1791, lorsque l'intendant Stillman fit l'inventaire de la propriété, il laissa une note. Les briques sous le poêle sonnent creux. La 3e rangée de briques dans le coin de la pièce est fissurée. On soupçonne un vide en dessous. L'espace ne fut jamais ouvert. Après la mort de Carnat, plus aucun marchand d'Albany ne vint à Harrowby. Plus aucun pot de confiture ne fut enregistré. Plus aucune demande de renseignements sur la cave. Mais au dos du livre, entre 2 pages blanches, se trouvait un morceau de lin rugueux, provenant probablement d'un sac de marchandises. Une légère empreinte digitale tachée de sucre y était gravée, et une odeur de fruits à noyaux pourris s'infiltrait sur les bords. Le coin était cousu de fil rouge, 3 lettres. Cash. Elijah Carna n'avait pas de deuxième prénom. Et 8 n'a laissé aucune trace de son utilisation de la broderie. À cette époque, dans le comté de Dutchess, la loi sur les femmes au foyer de 1782 autorisait les femmes célibataires à enregistrer des transactions informelles pour la reconnaissance de fin d'année. Anna Arobi n'avait jamais déposé de registre, mais lorsque sa succession fut examinée, les fonctionnaires du tribunal commencèrent à comparer les carnets d'Anna avec les registres de transactions officiels. Et ils découvrirent une tendance, une coïncidence incontournable. Sur les 108 noms inscrits dans le carnet d'Anna 87 figuraient également dans le registre officiel des transactions. Chaque entrée correspondait des bougies et baumes au sucre brut et à la charcuterie. Chaque personne qui lui rendait visite laissait une trace dans les registres municipaux. Mais ce qui a glacé le sang du greffier, c'est qu'aucun de ces noms dans le carnet d'Anna ne comportait de mention « retour ». Rien n'indiquait que les objets aient été retournés ou échangés. C'était une seule et unique façon, aller et venir. Vous avez entendu pas des bruits de pas, mais le silence qui suit de légères empreintes digitales. Quand quelqu'un vous demande si vous avez un coffre-fort et que vous vous taisez comme Anna, si vous avez déjà vu quelque chose disparaître silencieusement, racontez-le nous dans les commentaires. Et si ce n'est pas le cas, vous n'avez probablement pas regardé vos pieds assez attentivement. Not all debts are written in coin. In Anna Harrow's ledger, no record described any offering she made, only what others brought, how long they stayed, and when they left. Her hand never recorded a trade or return. Yet, curiously, town ledgers did reflect items leaving her home cloth, dried goods, even coin at regular intervals. And stranger still receipts filed under her name bore side notes, confirmations of time and place written not in Anna's hand, nor in that of the signers. It was this inconsistency that drew Elijah Stillman's eye. One entry in particular stood out, May 1789. A grain payment made by a man named Henry C., supposedly in exchange for a carved pine chest and 2 winter quilts. But when Stillman located that chest 2 years later in the Harrow attic, it sat neglected beneath mildewed canvas. On the lid, burned into the wood, were the letters HC returned, not received, returned. But that was impossible. Anna's ledger mentioned Henry C. only once in a stark, uneasy entry, dated 7 months before the payment was officially logged. That record reads more like observation than transaction. A Henry C. brought pipe tobacco, shirt soaked at collar, said little. Eyes tracked doorframe, stayed 2 hours 3 minutes, left before sundown, item not removed. Door did not close. At the bottom of the page, a symbol Anna had only used once before. A long dash with an upward tick. The same mark she'd once placed beside the Miss H entries. Beneath it, in a trembling script, I did not finish the act of going. Stillman marked that line with a red thread, a silent signal in his probate inventory to review further. But the grain transaction was marked complete in town files. So why then did the town's burial registry show a Henry C. matching the name and age dead 2 weeks before the supposed payment? Cause of death, sudden collapse in field, no estate, no kin. The signature on the chess transaction was his apparently, but the ink was different, fresher, and the witness line blank. When the chest was finally opened for inspection, investigators discovered something wedged beneath a false bottom, a brittle, undated slip of parchment stained by water and time. In the uneven scrawl of a child's hand, not Anna's nor any town scribe, 5 words had been pressed into the page. He made the leaving wrong. That same ink unsettlingly matched the final 2 pages of Anna's own ledger. Pages where no names appear, only dates, and no departures. But among the most quietly disturbing threads in Anna's records is the strange recurrence of a seemingly innocent object. A loaf of bread, unsliced. Bread was commonplace. A gift. A courtesy passed between neighbors rich and poor alike. But Anna's entries show something different. Not in the giving, but in the keeping. The first entry appears in winter 1786. Mrs. Bithal brought small round loaf unsliced, stayed 36 minutes, declined sitting. Disposition spoke quickly, requested linen back. Loaf returned at gate, not unusual until the final line. Anna rarely noted returned items. Visitors brought, she received. That was the rhythm. But then 3 months later the loaf came back. Mrs. Bethal again brought same loaf. Unsliced. Slightly hardened at heel. Stayed 21 minutes. No recollection of last visit. Eyes red. Spoke of wrong weather. Left without taking bread. This time Anna marked it with a diagonal hash, her symbol for things set aside. She did not mention eating it, nor discarding it. It simply remained. No mice, no rot, no mold. 1 year passed. The bread returned again, brought by someone new. Mr. Penrose brought brown-wrapped parcel. Inside, loaf unsliced. Said it was requested, knew not by whom. Stayed 19 minutes. Did not sit. Did not touch tea. Loaf placed on mantel. Removed upon departure. But this time Anna broke from her usual neutrality. She added a note, an editorial thought. Same heel crack as before. No mold despite age. The loaf, it seemed, had not aged. Or more chillingly, had aged wrong. When Elijah Stillman completed Anna's inventory after her death, he did not list bread among the perishables. But in the margin of his private notes, one small line, small parcel wrapped in paper, heavy for its size, discarded per order. That was it. No more explanation. But the phrasing was odd, not spoiled, not molded. Simply discarded per order. Heavy for its size. Years later, in 1872, when the Harrow home was briefly reopened for structural salvage, a torn scrap of brown wax paper was found wedged beneath the hearthstone. No writing, just creases folded again and again in precise lines, as if opened, resealed, opened again. There were faint indentations in the paper. A circle, roughly 6 inches across. Beneath the wax, a single pressed fiber, possibly a crumb, and a dark, oily trace. Archivists later tested the residue. It resisted moisture, smelled faintly bitter, like wax, or spoiled lard, or something that had once been food but no longer behaved like food. And at the back of Stillman's own files in a loose sheet, detached from any formal entry, he had scrawled one final quiet line, question remains regarding the origin of the preserved parcel. What happens when something is brought to your door, but never wants to leave? And what does it mean to keep receiving, but never giving, until the act of leaving itself comes undone? Sleep well if you can. This is Sleepy History Tales. 3 separate records listed the loaf's delivery, but not one mentioned its removal. Odd. One entry did note a hairline crack on the heel of the bread, identical across all 3 appearances. But beneath that, written in the same calm and deliberate hand, came a stranger note. Bread is not meant to be remembered nor returned. And then, almost as an afterthought, there is no evidence the loaf was ever consumed. No mention of it in town account books. No regional recipe matches its description. And yet, it had been real enough to be entered. Real enough to leave behind a mark. The final annotation, faint, nearly vanished at the top edge of the ledger's last completed page, read, "The same hands carried it, but not the same person." For all its strange entries, the Harobi ledger remained impeccably orderly. Anna's writing was sparse but steady. Every entry followed a rhythm. The name, the item, the duration, the note. Even when memory faltered or name slipped, the structure held until it didn't. The break came in the 3rd week of July, 1789. A wet, heavy heat had settled over the valley. Riverbanks were bloated. The air was thick and still. Anna's home, tucked behind ivy and stone, remained quiet. Curtains closed. Chimney dark. But over the course of 3 days, 4 neighbors, without consultation, recorded the same eerie detail. A black buggy with brass wheel caps had appeared outside Anna Harobi's home. It stood there unmoving from just after noon until the last bell, drawn by a dappled grey mare. No driver, no passengers, no sounds. Nothing entered. Nothing left. One neighbor, Martha Kenny, who lived just down the path, wrote to her cousin in Pipsy, "Anna receives no callers. Never has." But something waited at her gate past the noon bell. I thought to offer water for the horse, but the animal looked not still but finished. I did not wave. Later, the parish stable hand at Christ Chapel, who serviced carts for the lower farms, was asked about the buggy. He swore no cart of that make had been serviced or requested that summer. He described it as old-fashioned, worn, its tread pattern unfamiliar to his logs. And yet, no one came to collect its tracks. By morning, the buggy, the horse, the prints were gone. Rain had fallen lightly in the night, and in Anna's ledger that week is silent. The pages before and after remain intact. Page 67 lists a lace merchant passing through. Routine. Page 69 mentions a visit from Reverend Mallory's eldest son, who brought a broken pocket watch and stayed 42 minutes. But between them, page 68 is missing, ripped at the seam. The threads that had held it are frayed and water-stained, the linen edge bruised with a deep purplish ink bleed. A fan-shaped smear curves across the gutter, stops abruptly at the stitching. No legible word remains, only the shadow of something struck out before it dried. Archivist Elijah Stillman, in his 1791 Estate Review, marked it with a red thread and labeled it irregular absence, unusual discoloration. In the margin, he noted page forcibly removed. Moisture inconsistent with water damage. Ink bleed suggests entry struck or blotted. no matching handwriting elsewhere in book. And yet, beneath the missing page, a ghost remained. Under angled light, shallow indentations could still be seen swooping low and to the right. These curves didn't match Anna's spare and upright script. Scholars later speculated it may have been someone unused to writing, or someone not meant to be writing there at all. And this gets stranger. County probate records list no visitor to the Harobi property that week. No deliveries, no callers, no horse rentals, and no town crier logged a traveler seeking direction. But the gate to Anna's land, which locals said she hadn't opened in over 10 years, was found ajar by 3 different witnesses. That alone would have been enough to stir whispers. But then in 1863, during conservation work, something else was found. Behind the ledger's back cover, tucked behind the lining, was a piece of wax paper. No seal, no crest, barely visible unless dusted with chalk. On it, the outline of a hand pressed palm-down fingers wide. There was no smear, no slide, no hesitation. And in the center of the palm, a single perfect black dot. No name, no initials, only silence. Like a signature that chose not to speak. Dr. Amos Rai was not a man known beyond the Hudson River Valley. But within the fairy towns and hill farms north of Tivoli, he had a reputation for his discretion. He accepted cured fish as payment, trimmed his beard with a carpenter's blade, took no apprentices, and kept only one small call book preserved partially by the local vestry. From 1780 through 1791, he tended to 36 households. Fevers, fractures, confinements. He rarely traveled far, but once a month he visited the Harobi property, until one day he stopped. Anna's ledger had always recorded him, until it didn't. The only sewing tools ever found were strangely modest, a bent needle still looped with thread through the eye, and a worn thumb thimble with a cracked seam. Oddly, they had not been kept in any basket or drawer, but folded into the inner spine of Anna's journal, wedged beneath the stitched pages as if hidden deliberately. Probate officer Elijah Stillman would later scribble a cryptic margin note on folio 95 pages, bound by inhabitant not for preservation. Repulsion. Something meant to remain, and yet one final anomaly did not show itself through ink or paper, but through light. Only when folio 95 was tilted beneath a strong sunbeam did something unusual emerge. The fibers of the page caught a shallow looping groove, one not made by any pen, certainly not Anna's. It faltered, curled back, and repeated again and again in a slow, anxious rhythm. Not written, but pressed. Like a child tracing a fingernail into soft skin, it formed a face, or rather, the impression of an oval head with no eyes, no mouth, no features. Just the suggestion of presence. And just above it, in the blank space where no ink would ever take, was a faint fingerprint. Small. Too small to be Anna's. And too precisely centered to be accidental. It faces the reader. By August of 1790, 3 months after the widow Harobi was laid to rest in the St. Matthias burial ground, preparations were made to inventory her remaining possessions for auction, a common practice of the time. A modest notice was posted on the doors of the Red Hook Town Hall and later reprinted in the Hudson Valley Gazette to be let the household furnishings and personal effects of the late widow A. Harobi. Fine china linens, oak desk, Feather beds, upholstered chair, and other items, domestic and tasteful, all in sound condition. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. The kind of listing that usually drew quick interest. And it did. 17 responses came in. Yet, not one buyer stepped foot inside. County auction clerk Thaddeus Lawn kept a meticulous log that day, which still rests in the Dutchess County vault. He recorded each arrival. Some came in pairs, some alone, a few on borrowed carts or shared saddles. One, a bookseller from Kingston, had ridden overnight. And yet, beside every name, the same word was written declined. They came, they approached, they turned back. In one entry, Lawn noted, Jasper Dway walked to front step, removed hat, stood for time, did not knock, departed. Dway later submitted a brief affidavit. My interest is withdrawn. Furnishings appear well, but I find myself uninsaid. There was a hush at the sill. The Harrowby house, for all its age, was not in disrepair. The windows were intact. The chimney, though long cold, had not collapsed. The upper floors, though dry and aged, showed no sign of water damage. Even the linens, neatly folded inside a cedar chest, held no stains or decay, only the scent of dryness and time. Not rot. And yet, no one touched the door. According to a journal kept by the nephew of Martha Kenny widow to the neighboring property, there was a whisper shared in quiet tones among the locals. They say the bell rope hung too straight, didn't sway, even when brushed. By the third hour, Clark Lawn grew impatient. He entered the home himself to begin preliminary inspection. His notes are curt. Cherrywood chair with sun-bleached arms. Writing desk English make. 3 narrow beds. Clean ticking. And then, beside the mirror in the front hall, a final line. Faint trace of ash beneath glass. No fireplace nearby. Suggest remnant of prior tenant's habit. He remained inside no more than 10 minutes. The door, when closed behind him, made a sound. He did not describe. The sale was postponed. A second date was set for 2 weeks later. Fewer came. Of those who did too fell ill within days. Fevers, trembling hands, no clear cause. No diagnosis reached consensus. The event was quietly struck from the county register. No formal reason given. None of the Harrowby furnishings were ever listed again. No record survives to explain where they went, or if they ever left. But in the 1791 probate book, Elijah Stillman left a final amendment tucked in the margin of the Harrowby ledger entry. The handwriting is tighter as though written in haste. The line compressed, objects unclaimed, interior refused, items present yet not presentable. No mention of resale, no mention of donation, no mention of destruction. Years later, when the property was revisited by the parish for possible repurposing, a deacon left his own note in the church journal. The chairs remained set. The bedspreads still folded. Nothing covered, nothing stolen. And the front door still unlocked. The Harrowby house had not been entered since the failed auction. And yet, beside the small entryway table, where a Reno lamp had once been, left a faint ring of wax remained slightly warm, as if a candle had just been burning. As if someone had been standing there, quietly recently. Anna Harrowby's ledger was by every account a work of careful discipline. From the first folios to the final strained lines, every mark was committed in even steady ink iron gall and soot-based blends common to the time. likely mixed at home with vinegar and lampblack given the tonal inconsistencies. But she did not scratch. She wrote with purpose, each line aligned as though guided by some unseen geometry. Except once, on folio 76, nestled between otherwise unremarkable entries, a single signature appears, not in ink, but in pencil. The graphite is faint, nearly lost in the age-darkened paper. Close examination reveals it dragged oddly across the page. The ascenders hesitate like the point was dull, or the paper damp. And the name itself, Mr. Lemon, or Lament. The final letter is unclear. Beneath this, in Anna's unmistakable hand, is a single unsettling note, nudged just slightly left of her usual margin. He did not blink. No mention of offering. No length of stay. No comment on temperament. Just that. No census tax registry or ferry log recorded any lemon or lament in the region. The name exists only in her book. In 1903, archivist Henry Spade analyzed the graphite and noted its purity. No clay, no binders, no stabilizers. Raw graphite, uncommon for the period, fragile, unstable, yet still present. Anna's entries were often laced with detail. Flowers brought, shoes removed, guests observed through glass or heard muttering near the orchard. But this was different. Like a page from another life slid into her own. Some argued the pencil entry was added later. But handwriting comparisons dismissed that. The note beneath the name, the looped D, the clipped G, was hers. And that alone changed the shape of the entire ledger. She never wrote in pencil. She never listed any. No stylus, no charcoal. Her estate inventory was clear. 4 quill pens, a brass nib holder, 2 half-filled bottles of ink. But still, the pencil remained. 1 month later, her next recorded guest appears with no name. Only one word returned. No item brought. No speech exchanged. A note, eyes red. Finger to lips. Departure unclear. Beside this is another graphite stroke, not a name, not a flourish. Just a single vertical line, faint and crude, drawn in the same soft graphite as before. It resisted time. Candlelight revealed it shimmered oddly, not like lead, not like graphite. It caught the light from behind. Some said the mark wasn't written from within the room. It had been pressed. Anna Harobi's hand was deliberate. The ledger was never used for revisions or reflections. And yet, 4 times in its final third, one name appears, then disappears, torn. Scratched out not with ink but with pressure so deep, the fibers themselves buckled. The name erased, so thoroughly only the scar remained. One redaction sits beside a line about a chair that was never sat in. Another beside a guest who left, but not through the door. But the 5th, that's the one no one forgets. On folio 94, nearly at the end, the name appears again. Intact. Alone. A full page dedicated to it. No offerings listed. No comments. No time. No departure. Only Anna's final line beneath it. He asked to see the ledger. The ink is darker. Fresher. The loop of the G trails longer than usual, and the dot over the I is misplaced as if forgotten, then quickly added. Her hand, usually so confident, appears hesitant, not in shape, but in rhythm. And unlike every other entry in the ledger, each written with efficient use of space, this name stood alone. a single page, blank around it. Anna had filled entire margins for lesser guests like the two sisters who stayed through a storm and offered stewed quince. She even noted they walked slower after prayer. But this stood by itself. And after that, everything changed. Her handwriting shrank. Entries became sparse. Guests no longer had names, only descriptions. The older man, round hat, white sleeves, left hand inked. It was as if specificity had become dangerous or unwelcome. No part of the ledger suggests Anna ever showed it to guests. Her records are private, reflective. Notes taken only after a visitor had left. The idea that one of them asked to see it, that he knew it existed, wasn't just intrusive. It was a violation. At the bottom corner of the page, a faint impression remains. Not a signature, not ink, but a shallow flat pressure shaped like a thumbprint. Yet, it bore no swirl, no ridges, just presence, as if something had pressed it from above or below. The ink from that final line smudged onto the opposite page where it mirrored faintly. He asked to see the ledger. When the book was found years later wedged inside the chimney flue, this page was the only one that had been folded. A sharp, deliberate crease, pressed tight. Inside the seam lodged between paper and silence was a single coarse hair. Too long to be hers, too dark to be missed. No one ever recalled seeing a visitor by that name. No grave records list him. No town ledger, no census. Only this one name, scratched out everywhere, except once. Some ledgers are meant to be read. Others are meant to be forgotten. If you'd like more stories buried between the margins of history, subscribe to Sleepy History Tales and let the forgotten be remembered. In 1797, nearly 7 years after the widow Harobi's death, a local map was made for zoning purposes. Though most of the house and land markers were clearly listed, Harobi House was no longer marked. Not bricked up, not transferred, just gone. But the people of Red Hook still knew where it was, still took the detour, still bowed their heads when passing the moss-covered porch, though the moss never crept up the wooden door. In an 1803 land survey, the surveyor noted in the margin, "There's a structure north of the old apple orchard which reflects no light, no bird song, no wind." I left without knocking. No one lived at Harobi House after 1790. No one cleaned. No one took anything away, but nothing was lost. The furniture remained as it was, as if waiting for a hand no longer in time. A priest of a later generation, sent to inspect the old grounds, wrote in his now discolored personal diary, "I dare not receive communion in a place that has never been closed." And the notebook. The notebook in which Anna wrote her last lines in ink that never dried next to a handprint that did not belong to her is still in the archives. No one has asked to see it again. No one has offered to translate her words. There is only one strange thing. The paper in the notebook has never yellowed. Even after more than 2 centuries, it is still as soft as the skin of a hand. The hand of someone who has never left the page. Do you hear something? A gentle knock, not from the door, but from within your own memory. Thank you for accompanying Sleepy History Tales on this story tonight. If you see something left between the lines, write to us in the comments. And if you ever pass through Red Hook on a rainy day, don't turn down the unmarked road. We'll be back next week with another story. Also vague, also unfinished. Good night. If you can sleep,